We know Philadelphia as the birthplace of America, the city of brotherly love, the cradle of liberty. But rewind back to the 1700s, and liberty here depends on who you are. Not everyone is free, not everyone is treated like a brother. Enslavement is woven into daily life. Some profit from it, some ignore it, some quietly oppose it. Then one winter night in 1773, a woman named Dinah Nevil, who is both of Lenape and African descent, arrives by boat with her children and makes a bold declaration to anyone who will listen. We are free people. Her stand and what happens next helps ignite the first abolitionist society in American history. Welcome to the 52 Weeks of First podcast, brought to you by Philadelphia's Historic District and Visit Philly. I'm Marisa Magnatta from WMMR's Preston and Steve Show, and joining me is Tomika Bryant, Philly media personality, lifestyle expert, and a storyteller who's been featured on Fox 29, QVC, and Forbes. She's here to help us unpack how one legal case, a group of determined citizens, and a moral line in the sand helped launch an organized movement against slavery and why its legacy is still unfolding. Welcome, Tomika. How are you today?
Thank you. I am wonderful.
Thank you for joining us for such a powerful conversation.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, were you aware of the story?
So I didn't know the mother story, Dinah. I didn't know her story, but I knew the story of Anthony and, the Quakers and kind of what he did and how the Abolitionists got started. I knew that part, but I didn't know kind of why he started. I knew he was an educator, and I just figured, he was very passionate about making sure that everyone had quality education. Had no idea what it came from.
That seems to be a common thread in the 52 Weeks of First, is that there are stories behind the stories, and there's lots to learn. So should we dive in together?
Let's do it.
All right. So we rewind back to the 1700s in Philadelphia. Slavery's still legal, and it's present all over the city. Freedom of rights, they're uneven and unconditional everywhere throughout the city. Fast forward to Dinah Nevil. She is of Lenape and African descent. She comes to Philadelphia with her 6 children. And she says, we're free, because there is a Pennsylvania law that says anyone of Lenape descent cannot be enslaved. The city was not kind to her as she believed it would be. So a claimant challenges her status. Her case goes to court. During the time while her case is in court, Dinah and her 6 children are enslaved. They're forced to work 6 days a week. They're working in terrible conditions, as we can imagine. And then the absolute worst happens. And 2 of her children die while they're enslaved, right in front of her. She loses 2 of her children that she brought to this city because she thought that they would be safe and this would be their path to freedom.
So when you think about it, right, you have to look at kind of where we are right now in current time. I think that there are still people living her story, right? That they came here looking for opportunity. And, we are supposed to be the land of the free, home of the brave. And it just didn't turn out that way. So I think her story is so relevant because it is the story that so many people can relate to. But I also hope that while they get the pain from her story, they also get the victory in her story and recognize what it took for her to make the decision to leave, because that could not have been easy. And I'm sure she heard through the grapevine, about coming to Pennsylvania and being free, and she believed it, which is why when she came here, she proudly proclaimed, "We are free." And was probably like, what are you talking about? You need me to work and be a slave. I am free. And I think that we want to draw from her strength, but it still happens today, right? I mean, we're in 2026 and there are still people, while they might not be enslaved in those terms, but they're still enslaved.
So the court rules, ultimately, that her and her children are enslaved, but her story is not over. The Quaker abolitionists are outraged. And that's where we meet Anthony Benezet, who is a French abolitionist. He's an educator, and he calls a meeting. 9 people show up. 9 is better than none.
I agree. And when you think about kind of what the Quakers have meant to Pennsylvania. I'm not surprised that he was a Quaker. I was a little surprised that he was French. I didn't think about that, but it made sense. I guess, if you're not born here, you don't really subscribe to a lot of the laws and you still kind of have your own thing. So I guess it made sense in that instance. And then him being Quaker and how the Quakers really have always been against, slavery and really, wanting better for everyone. I feel like with the Quakers, they wanted everybody to kind of be on an equal playing field, right? Realizing that it probably couldn't happen, but they wanted to kind of provide some opportunity. And so I think that's where the whole education piece came in. And he's like, well, I'm an educator. Everybody should know how to read, right? Like just basic things. And he's like, well, I don't understand why this can't happen for everyone. So, he does that. And then, it makes sense to me because as the mom, she brought her children here because she wanted her kids to have a better education, which is what we do as parents today. When we're looking to move, we're like, okay, where can I go for the best school district? Where can I go to make sure my kids are going to get what they need? So none of that surprises me, especially hearing that, they were like, we don't believe you. Because I think women are still dealing with that today.
I couldn't agree more. And it goes back hundreds, thousands of years in the same fight, just different times and different things that we're fighting for.
Yep, different deed. Yep, I agree.
When Anthony joined these group of people together, they were opposing and they were challenging the legal enslavement of people. And pretty much that's how we came to find the first Pennsylvania Abolition Society, which was the first in North America right here in Philadelphia, brought together by Dinah and her family.
And so for me, hearing that, right, it makes me really proud to be a Philadelphian, right? And I love the city, but I also know that while we have some amazing firsts, a lot of things we could have done a lot better, right? And I think uncovering these firsts and really owning that we could have done things better.
Well, especially when things get paused by war, which is where their story leads to. It's the Revolutionary War, pressure of that looming, plus the anti-war Quaker stance, the group collapses. Then one of the members, Thomas Harrison, he continues working on Dinah's case solo to help her out. Eventually, this is a beautiful part of the story. Eventually, he buys and frees the family with his own money. So there are those good people that believe and will do whatever it takes.
Absolutely. And it's refreshing, right? And it also goes back to, like how you trace the footsteps for the Underground Railroad. There were mainly people that were free, that were white people that helped hide these families. And so that's what that reminded me of. Like, I was like, oh, I could see him being one of the ones like, you know what, come in here, let me help you. And then, it takes a bold person to be willing to stand against basically an army.
That's true. We fast forward to 1784. Society recognizes and expands the influence of the first Abolitionist Society. It's later led by Ben Franklin, who's the founder of so many firsts, right? The godfather,
yes,
if we will.
Absolutely. I envision him being the person that's like, well, I'm not afraid. This is what needs to happen. So if no one else will do it, I'm going to do it. And so I love that about him.
I envision him so similarly. Like he had the power and he, in some ways saw right from wrong and knew a really good path to take and used his own influence over people to lead them in the right direction.
Absolutely. I agree.
That then influenced abolitionist groups nationwide. And so we see growth there and we see that coming, from our city here in Philadelphia. How do you feel about Dinah? Do you relate to her in any way? You yourself are a mother. You're a powerful woman. You're a survivor. You are a strong personality. Could you imagine being in a situation like that?
So when I, learned of her story and kind of what she did, I was so taken aback because in my mind, I'm like, I can't imagine what she said or what people said to her to try to discourage her. And then to get here and to be so brave and so boldly say, we are free. Like, I don't know what you think is going on here. We are free. I love, love, love that story. And as a mother, it absolutely touched on my heartstrings because I have two children and I have always wanted better for them than I had. Now, my childhood was amazing. I had amazing parents. Pretty much anything I wanted to do, I was able to do. So for me, I wanted to make sure that my children had that same thing. Like if, if they wanted to get to the moon, let's figure out how to get there. And so for me, Dinah is me, right? I think that she came before me and she led the path, and it was like, okay, now I got to do something. So I am so inspired by her and her story. I love, what she did and how she was bold about it.
Okay, so here's just an interesting thought. Like, when people think about, Philadelphia and freedom, they think about founding documents and famous names, but maybe not an organization like this. Why do you think it gets so overlooked?
I think it's overlooked because it's easy. I just think that people want to take the parts of history that they want. And so it's a lot easier to say a person as opposed to the organization, because then you kind of got to give claim to it. You got to say, like, you know what, this organization came in and they did an amazing thing. Like even now, we have organizations that are still doing great things, but oftentimes you don't hear the organization. You may hear one name as though there aren't other people that are a part of it.
We almost laughed that it was 9 people. 9 people showed up, and 9 people made a difference. Are there any times that you can think of where it's just a small group of people that were able to start a revolution?
I don't believe it takes 20 people to affect change. Like I think 5 people. I mean, really one person, but sometimes it's lonely.
Yeah. Well, you look at those first abolition organizers, and then you look at people doing advocacy today, and how do they relate? How do they inspire each other?
I think it's just different, right? Because now we have so many tools at our hands that they didn't have, right? But they still made it work. They used what they had to make it work. Now we have so many tools. Sometimes I think we have too many tools. And so it hinders people from moving forward, right? It'll become, well, let's take social media, for instance, right? Well, we want to post this on social media. No, I don't agree that should post. Well, it doesn't matter. Let's take action. Like sometimes it becomes too much talk and not enough action.
Do you think social media helps or hurts?
Where I think it helps is that I think that social media allows news information to get to people in the way that they want to consume it. The flip side of that becomes a lot of times there's no fact checking, right? And so you post something, and depending on who sees it, they instantly believe it, whether or not it's true or not. And so those are the things that I don't like. And then I don't like the internet bullying and, I don't like those type of things. But all in all, I think social media can be good when used properly.
When there's origin stories like this, how does that inspire grassroots organizations that we see today?
So I think origin stories inspire grassroots organizations because they recognize that I can do it, right? I think it gives you, it like warms your heart. It makes you feel like, you know what I'm doing is not in vain. I can do this and make a difference. And I feel that when you're starting an organization, and if it's not like the popular one or it's hard to get off the ground, you can kind of feel like alone and alienated and kind of feel like, I'm going to throw in the towel because this isn't working. But I think when you see that a small group of people came together and affected change, I can only imagine what was being said to them. Like, why are you doing this? Or what was being thrown at them and what they were being called, or like, depending on what their businesses were, if people weren't, patronizing their business. I can only just imagine what they had to deal with, right? To make this change. And so I think that when we're starting these small, grassroots organizations, we have the best intentions, but other people don't always have good intentions. So I think hearing stories of people who probably dealt with the same thing you dealt with really kind of makes you feel like, okay, I can do this. I'm on the right track. And I just think it's inspiring.
Well, the freedom paradox still exists. Just like the 1700s, Philadelphia claimed liberty while practicing enslavement. Modern cities, including Philadelphia, still are wrestling with contradictions like inequitable school funding, housing insecurity, environmental injustice in specific neighborhoods. Like, we're still seeing it today. It's just in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to share these stories and to write them down, to speak them into a microphone so people can hear them and see them and share them and keep telling them to each other, to their neighbors, to their families, to anyone who will listen.
Absolutely. I mean, because when you think about the fact that how we got stories is from our elders doing this, right? They sat around, they talked, they told stories, We don't do that enough now, right? And I tell people, if you are blessed enough to have your grandparents around, you need to sit with them and just let them talk. Hear what they have to say. So, my parents, I make sure that I go over there and we chat about whatever they want to talk about. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take it all in because one day you're not going to be here. And I need to make sure that your story is alive. And that's how we keep them alive. We got to keep talking about it. And as I stated, we got to talk about it even when it hurts, right? We know that history happened. And the only way that we don't repeat it is to continue to talk about it.
It's so true. Tomika, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. It was a joy speaking with you, and we look forward to following your adventures. Where can somebody follow you and find you on social media?
Well, thanks for having me. This has been so fun. I love talking about these stories, and hopefully they've been inspiring, and people will do more research. But you can find me on Instagram at Tomika Talks, and I'm pretty much everywhere at Tomika Talks.
We'll be looking for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this week's journey through Philadelphia's first. Follow us on social media using @52FirstsPhilly. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you know who loves a good origin story. We'll see you next week.